a meaning crisis that's at large in our culture. I think Tolkien really grappled with that in the trenches, right, of the war, and that's why the Inklings did what they did. It hasn't gone away. We're still struggling with it. Maybe it's even gotten worse over the last century. And so if we can heal storytellers the same way Tolkien wanted to try to, heal himself and his friends, then we can provide better stories so that we can build a better world, build a better future, the future we believe in, right? And so there we go. Heal the storyteller, we can heal the imagination, and with that, we can then heal the culture. I think Fellandfair it's what you do is not only fun and epic, it's also heartening. A little bit of a side tangent. Have you ever read Stephen Lawhead?
Yes.
There's one novel he writes about a man who goes back in time to the time of the Anglo-Saxons, I think it is. And the whole story is about an immersion in the ancient virtues, right, of brotherhood and camaraderie and fellowship and all of these things that Tolkien revives and brings back to life through, the Lord of the Rings. And so this character learns to live and breathe and become, one of these old warriors, deeply bonded to chieftain and to time and to place, as opposed to us today where we're so unrooted and we feel like aimless and all of this. So what I love about what you do with Fellandfair, and I want to ask how you got into it and why it matters to you and why do you do it at all? You make real, like today, right now, with your weekend warrior events, you make this stuff feel real again. It's not just play acting, right? It's not just fun. There's also an element of like participation of, again, not even game theory, but you're like reviving something. You're making it real again. I want to ask, like, what's been some of the impact on your life doing that? Welcome, Zan, to the show. It's great to have you with us. And what was the inspiration for Fellandfair? Why did you start it? And what's the adventure been so far?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here. The Fellandfair story is really an evolution. It's not something that was this vision that I had, as a 12-year-old that I just launched into. It was something that's one step after another as one door is open and others have closed. But it's based around a love of storytelling, a love of the way that really good stories can impact your life and inspire you. One thing I like to say is that we are often the sum of our heroes, the sum of our childhood heroes. The people that we admire, that we follow. I mean, it's like you are what you eat, but you are what you consume. If your heroes are if you pick good heroes as a child, you will often imitate those people. And then, it's funny because we're surprised when we idolize celebrities or we idolize athletes, and then they turn out, to have a, kind of a bad time. And then we wonder why our culture is following in the footsteps of people that have their priorities misaligned. And especially with the concept of heroism, the ultimate kind of form of heroism being self-sacrifice and living in a way that serves others. And I love these stories. I loved reading Lord of the Rings. I loved reading history and historical fiction. But there was another element where when I love films, that were equally inspiring. And when those Lord of the Rings films came out and I was, 10, 11, 12, then I was watching, got the extended editions, got the behind the scenes DVDs, and I was watching the 30 something hours of documentaries on those. And I kind of realized like, this is just normal people that are doing this. Like, sure, they have $1 billion budget, but this is just people that were like, well, we need to figure out how to make a sword. We need to figure out how to make these clothes. And we need to sketch out how we think Edoras will look. So I kind of had this idea of I wanted to do that. I wanted to be that. I wanted to have these experiences. And the reality is, unfortunately, Sherwood Forest is far too small to house outlaws these days. So that, being Robin Hood was not a real life career possibility. But yeah, I know. Yeah. The Ints would have something to say about the size of Sherwood Forest these days. But so I was like, well, what's the closest thing that I can get to these experiences while still continuing in my real life that is, making sure I'm being productive and responsible and all that sort of stuff. So filmmaking and theater was the kind of that avenue, because when you do filmmaking, when you do theater, you can put on the armor and you can go play this character. And when you play that character, you get to step into their boots and you get to learn lessons about yourself and have experiences that Zan is having these experiences, even though I'm playing Robin Hood or I'm playing this knight or that character. So I did that in high school and college. And then I actually went through a commissioning program. I became an officer in the Navy, and then went to flight school, became a naval aviator and a helicopter pilot. And when I was doing that in the Navy, I was moving all around all the time. You don't have time to form community. There was no film group. There was no theater that I could be part of. So I kind of continued my crafting journey, because in college I had done a bunch of student films with folks and just fun projects that we've been part of. And I had really wanted to do medieval archery, but I didn't want to do the kind of medieval archery where you go down to sportsman's, outdoors, whatever, and you get these aluminum or fiberglass arrows. I wanted arrows like Robin Hood had. I wanted a wooden longbow. I wanted a yew bow. I wanted, goose feather shafts, right? And so I had to learn how to make those because this was, 2008. There was no Etsy. There was no like marketplace for that sort of stuff. So I learned how to make it. And then, once you do that, well, you got to learn how to make the quiver. So that's leatherworking. Then you got to make the costume, which is sewing. And so I kept kind of continuing that. And this was when Instagram was in its early years. So I got to share with people that were passionate about the same things I were and could connect with them all over the world. And then I actually connected with a blacksmith who was working on some armor and some swords and found out he lived like an hour from my parents' home. So when I was home for Christmas, we ended up meeting up and started forming this fellowship. And we realized not only can we have this online community, but we can have an in-person community. We can find people from around the world that can do this stuff together. So when I got out of the Navy, when I was about 25, I actually ended up getting medically retired. So it was not really my plan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The plan got changed. And so I had this opportunity, 25 years old, to say, what am I going to do with the rest of my life for the second time in my life? So I started Fellandfair. I had grown the Instagram account and I'd already been doing some work and stuff there, but moved back to South Carolina, moved into my parents' basement. I was unable to actually even get a job at that time because of my health. And so I was like, well, this is the chance to start my own thing. I can work on my own schedule. And so started slowly building that while healing and, gathered that fellowship around me. I messaged about 25 people that I had followed on Instagram and said, hey, I've got a cabin in the woods in South Carolina. Come hang out with us for a week, which is a wild thing to ask people. And, there will be swords.
Yeah.
But about 15 people did. Yeah. About 15 people did, and that was our first Fell company meeting. And that kind of started building this in-person community. And then a couple years later, we were invited to be part of an event to costume design and help act in this event called Weekend Warrior, which was put on by the Forge Studios up in Virginia. It was I would say it is a moral success, but a financial failure. So we ended up kind of taking it over and saying, well, I think we could bring it to South Carolina. We could find a way to do it that it would actually be, at least self-sustaining, if not profitable. And because what we experienced there was I had never done role playing. I was like, I'm an actor. Like I'm not a LARPer. I'm an actor. So I'm going to come up and act, but I'm not, that's not what I'm into. But then the experiences that I had doing this live action immersive experience was I got to step into somebody else's boots, not from, there's that great sketch of Sir Ian McKellen talking to Ricky Gervais about like how he acts is like Sir Ian, action, Gandalf, you shall not pass, cut, Sir Ian. In the same way, like that's the way filming works, really. Like very often you are kind of like, you are that character from action to cut, but otherwise you're getting direction and as Zan and that sort of stuff. But in an event like this for 48 hours straight, you are another character. And so you get and you're making decisions as that character. You're not just reading off a script. You're not obeying direction. You are making decisions as that character, which means there's opportunity to expand and explore. You can try being characters that you've never tried before. You can try personality traits or reactions that you wouldn't do in this somewhat lower consequences world, but where there still is consequences and feedback. And so that just really, there was an experience that I always tell people the story, but there was a young lady who came up to me after the event. She said, I'm a single mom, I have 3 kids, and every year I do one thing for myself. So I flew from Texas to come do, this was my big annual thing. She said, I showed up with a sword and that was all I had. And tunic, basic clothes, that sort of stuff. And she said, we were getting ready for the battle. And you came up to me and you said, is all you have a sword? And I said, yes. And she said, so you went and got your spear and you handed me your spear. And he told me to stand in the front line. She said, I was terrified. As the enemy shield wall formed up ahead of me, they're chanting as they're marching, arrows are whizzing over. She's like, I was terrified, but then the battle joined and I started using my spear. And of course I died. So I went back and I got healed and I came back into the battle and did it over and over again. And it was a little easier the second time. And then again, and she said, for years I'm a single mom. And I don't know, I've been terrified of my children being under threat, and that in that moment of stress or trial, I would freeze up, I would lock up, I wouldn't have the courage to take care of them, I wouldn't have the courage to do this. She said, but now I know I have that in me, that I could do that. And because she was able to step into another world in another set of circumstances and play stuff out and learn about herself in this other world. So that was just massive. And I thought, man, there's no way we can let this event die because we've already seen what the first one, the sort of way that it can impact people's life. And so that launched us into the immersive experiences. So we started Weekend Warrior. 6 years later, we started War of the Barons, and then we split Weekend Warrior in two and made the Hearthlands. So now we have, between our 1-day events and our 3-day events, we'll have over 1,500 people come through our events this year. And, we just actually wrapped up our Party of Special Magnificence, which is our annual halfling events, big celebration. Everything from fireworks to a potato bar to just forest tours and walking adventures and all that sort of stuff. It's a ton of fun. But we realized that giving people the chance to step into their stories, to be participants in the storytelling process, is very, very powerful from a learning perspective. And not to mention that, but there's all these other ancillary benefits where you have people are motivated to get more active because they're like, hey, I'm going to come sword fight and I want to be able to participate the whole time. There's all sorts of they're motivated to build community and to engage with each other. People that maybe were isolated in their hobbies or crafts now have a community around which they can form this bond. We inspire creativity, where there's one of the things I love about the hobby is there's all of these different forms of expression that you can have. You can, people that love assembling the costumes, designing the looks. There's people that like sewing, leather work, people that like blacksmithing, people that like the acting and the role play, people that like the fighting, people that like the intrigue and the questing and the game elements of it. So there's a little bit of something for everybody. So you can come to an event and not sword fight at all and still have a great time. You can not ever make anything, but just have places that you can buy it from and then come. So you don't have to have all of those, but you can kind of tailor the experience that you want to have. And then you spend, 48 to 72 hours with a bunch of people that have been brought together by the same thing that you're passionate about. And you have your feasts and your battles, and you drink your ale and you sing around the campfire, and it allows you to step out of time, back to what society would have been like for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, we're living in a very unique and isolated time as humans, something that we are not biologically or culturally set up for, both the isolation element and then also the, we have had, community feasts and dances and this sort of stuff since earliest recorded human history. We don't have those community elements anymore. And then even when we do, we often cherry pick people from, like our best friends, and we'll hang out, right? But you're not forced to hang out with people that maybe aren't naturally like you, or have different political opinions, or have different social status. But at events like this, all those people come in, and you're no longer, a doctor from Virginia and a college student from Georgia and a, politician from Germany. You're now, Igor, Vaughn, and, Segel the Wise, and the three of you have to go solve a problem. And there is no rank, there is no social status, because when when we meet each other, the first thing you ask, hey, what's your name? Tells you about them, their family background, their ancestry. Where are you from? Tells you about them. What do you do for a living? Tells you about them. Where do you go to school? Tells you about them. Now you're in this box that's been created by our society. Here it's like, I'm Torvin. Cool. Let's learn about each other. Let's I'm Ivor, you're Torvin. We're all equals here. Let's go figure that out. And then through merit and through the story and the adventure, then now we can start building our narratives, our story, and our characters out. But it's a great equalizer, a great leveler when everybody comes in and can kind of express themselves. So that's the very long-winded explanation of a little brief history of Fell and Fair, how we got into live action events, the value of storytelling in all of those things. And then that's not to mention our Fell and Fair production workshop, which we make costumes for film and theater, but we also make them for everybody. So we have a retail site, shop.fellandfair.com, where everybody can buy Hollywood level costumes. We use authentic materials and historically inspired patterning so that we can get these really cool looks, but they're also practical and functional, and they feel good when you wear them. And because that's another strong element of what we do, is we want everything we do to come from a place of authenticity and reality. We're not putting lipstick on a pig. We're actually trying to build something real and true and authentic to the character, to the person that can function in the way it does. And then obviously we have the film side, where we can create content, we can express the stories that we're passionate about, we can build those stories, we can interpret other stories. I mean, a lot of our photography is around taking inspiration from people like Tolkien or G.K. Chesterton or C.S. Lewis, and then building out some cool imagery around it, and then bringing in their words and modern applications, some kind of breakdown of what are they saying and how does that apply to our daily lives. So that's Fell and Fair, not in a nutshell, but maybe in like a cantaloupe shell or a watermelon size shell.
You've opened so many cans of worms. I have too many questions. We do not have time to get into all of them, so I need to like you threw Chesterton in there. I'm like, how the heck do you know that name? Like that's a specific subset of like literary people know that name. Gosh, what I want to ask. You said something awesome early on about we are the sum of our heroes. It's maybe in the last sort of 10 minutes perhaps that we have here. And then I want to ask about character immersion, because we're a community of storytellers, and I think that there's a corollary here. When an author goes to write a story, you're kind of LARPing as a character for about 50,000 words, 100,000 words, and that does something to you. It changes you. And I'm going to assume it's, when you go and do that for 3 days as somebody else, that's got to have impacted you and people. As you can see, way too many questions. Some of our heroes, that might just be the title of this video. Who are your heroes? Literary, fictional, not just, in real life.
I mean, Robin Hood was probably my first. This character that said, I see oppression and I have the ability to, we have these corrupt, governing rulers that are extorting from people. And I have a way to equalize that through skill at arms, but in a fun, witty way. It's not, let's go firebomb a car, but it was always fun. Sure. and enjoyable. Right now, maybe he would have done that if he had the option. But there was this nobility and the chivalry and this high road element that Robin Hood kind of takes that I really liked. And longbows are cool. And I would say after that, there's another author, G.A. Henty, who I'm a big fan of. He wrote fiction for young men in the late 18th century. And he was an attaché to Queen Victoria, traveled all over the world, and he had all these cultural experiences. And so he wrote these stories where he'd place a young man, 13 to 18, next to an important historical figure, and then would kind of walk them through the history that happened. So it was a great historical fiction perspective to kind of learn about history through his eyes. Then obviously going into the Lord of the Rings movies coming out, Tolkien capturing my imagination, and then the people that made the movies equally inspiring, because I saw them going out and building their own stories and their own adventures and becoming heroes to us because of the craft that they were able to create. Obviously, some of my favorites in Tolkien, obviously Aragorn, Boromir, Faramir, Imrahil, Éomer. I love the men characters because they don't have, immortality. They don't have super strength. They don't have often magical weapons or, powers. They're just men placed in a tough spot who chose nobility, who chose courage, who are able to lead and organize and inspire people. Another one of my favorite series is Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maturin series. Master and Commander is the Russell Crowe movie. Mm-hmm. Another huge hero. Horatio Hornblower before that. So obviously, Absolutely. as a naval officer, naval fiction and naval history is a huge, very impactful to me. And then once, I think probably in my 20s, reading Lewis and Chesterton on a broader scale, not just Narnia, but reading the Space Trilogy, reading Surprised by Joy, reading The Everlasting Man, and obviously Ballad of the White Horse is one of my top all-time favorite works. And really getting in, inside, their understanding in their mind and their process, the way that they work through this stuff. It's just been absolutely delightful. And then being able to engage with folks and have in-person conversations with people like Joseph Pierce, Father Dwight Longenecker, folks like this that are also thinking about this and that are working through this stuff, and being able to hear from them and seeing the way that they have chosen their own hero's journey, their own hero's path. So now I have real, tangible human folks that I can look up to, not just mythic people. And, obviously history is a huge thing. Robert the Bruce, William Wallace, Henry V, Black Prince, Edward the Black Prince of Wales, Richard the Lionheart, and those are all just a smattering of historical figures. But I would say that is the crew that has kind of brought me to where I am now.
Incredible. So when you, with all of this in the back of your mind, and then you go into like a weekend, warrior thing, or you've got these 3-day immersion events. Mm-hmm. Okay, what's a good question here? What's been the most helpful or interesting thing that's happened to you after one of these events that you then perhaps incorporated into the rest of your life?
Yeah. So one of the fascinating things that I found out this once again at the very first event, one of the challenges with the first event was we had a situation where one of the original founding business partners made it very clear that he was not going to be a good long-term fit for the company. And so after the first event, we had to actually have a board meeting and remove him from the company, which is a very hard thing to do if you're a passionate, caring, empathetic person that cares about this as an individual that you've worked for, but this person has made actions that will not allow him to remain part of the community. So one of the fascinating things was I got to play a character. So the character that I built, Torvin, for the first event is I kind of took Commodore Norrington from Pirates of the Caribbean, kind of his professionalism and his we all part of the Navy and this is what we will do. And this is the way it goes, lad. Sure. But then also some of from Tombstone, Doc Holliday's kind of like, I'm your Huckleberry. Like he's not going to go and get in your face, but if you want to throw down, he'll throw down and he'll throw down hard. He will mess you up. So the cool thing about that is as I play that character, I realized this character doesn't care about what anybody else thinks. He doesn't care about like being liked. He doesn't care about other people's feelings or emotions, except for his people that he's in charge of and that he's protecting. So my Sea Lords, I'm very protective of, but anybody else, like there was even one moment where there was an embassy that came up from the Kingsmen and an embassy that came up from the Rangers. And I walked out to the camp and I said, who was here first? And I said, sir, well, the Rangers were here first. I was like, all right, bring the Kingsmen in. Just even things like that. Like I'm going to be unjust to throw these people off just because to show them that I don't care about order or precedence or something like that. And I had a lady who was a non-player character who was in one of the other groups come up to me afterwards. She said, the whole first day, I just thought you were the biggest a-hole because you were such a jerk to everybody. And then I came in and I saw you around your Sea Lords. I was like, he loves them and they love him. And like, this is a totally different perspective, right? So I learned with this character, in order to do the right thing, you sometimes have to be okay with letting other people be upset with you. You can't make everybody happy. So I literally 2 days later walked into this meeting and I thought, I cannot walk into this meeting as Zan. I have to walk in as Torvin. I know what the right thing is to do. We have all the evidence that we need. We have the steps. And I don't care if he cries. I don't care if he, begs. I don't care if he gets angry. I don't care what the posts on Facebook afterwards say. This is what I have to do. And this is what I need to do. So that was that moment that I learned that, wow, I actually learned a real life lesson by experiencing another character's personality, for lack of a better term, within all that. So that was the big turning point for me, where I just realized the importance of it in my own life and the way that can continue to kind of spill over into real life situations.
Amazing. We are out of time. There's so many more questions. Maybe we'll have a part 2 at some point. But
sounds good.
What is next for fellandfair? What are you working towards now?
So obviously our events are continuing to expand and grow. We've got Weekend Warrior coming up in about 4 weeks. Hearthlands is in 7 weeks. So we're in full motion for that. We're also just working on expanding our retail costume stuff. So we're about to actually drop a new line that we're really excited for, some new garments. We've got 2 film projects in the next 2 weeks that I'm really excited for. We're also trying to, looking towards larger, bigger, better things as we grow, as we have the resources. We want to get a long-term property to be the home for our events so we can have even more in-depth experiences. We want to continue our work with film, doing larger and larger projects so that we can tell these really cool and valuable stories. And then we want people to say, that was an awesome movie. Wait, you mean I can buy the costume stuff from it and then I can come and see where it was filmed and play the characters and live it out? That's awesome. We want to have that whole experience to be able to bring it to you. So that's what's coming over the next couple of years. We just have to do the work to make it happen.
I think